So the PM's talking to the House of Commons later today. What do you think he's going to say?
So I think he'll set out all the facts. What emerged on Thursday with the report in The Guardian was that information had been withheld from the Prime Minister and from other ministers involved in the appointment. Critically, that the vetting agencies had made a recommendation, but that recommendation was not adhered to in terms of developed vetting status being given to Peter Mandelson, the incoming ambassador to the United States.
Can I ask a slightly different question? Why did the government announce that Peter Mandelson had got the job before doing the vetting?
So the process by which a political appointee can be appointed as an ambassador was one that we inherited from previous governments. In that process, appointments could be made ahead of developed vetting status
Stop.
being undertaken.
Sorry. Could feels an important word here.
Yes.
Because we know how controversial Peter Mandelson is.
Yep.
I mean, you've been around long enough to know, right? You know,
Sure.
he's had to resign before from stuff. There was a knowledge about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, right?
Sure.
So why did you announce the appointment of Peter Mandelson before the vetting?
So there was an established process. That process, in retrospect, was inadequate, and that's why already, even before the events of the last few days, the government has moved to change that process to make sure that vetting precedes appointment.
You said
so you're
could.
right to recognise that that was a flawed process.
You said, sorry, because you said it could be made, the announcement could be made. That doesn't mean it had to be made. You weren't forced to make the announcement before the vetting.
But the government of the day was following the established process for the appointment of a political appointee.
I think that was a mistake by this government, wasn't it?
So the appointment of Peter Mandelson was a mistake.
To announce the appointment before doing the vetting, right? That was a mistake by this government. You accept that?
Peter Mandelson shouldn't have been appointed the ambassador. The Prime Minister, never mind myself, accepts that that was a mistake. It is possible that as well as the error in terms of the appointment of Peter Mandelson, there are significant lessons that need to be learned on process, and you're absolutely right. One of those lessons that's already been learned is the need to make sure that this deep vetting is undertaken prior to the appointment and announcement of these ambassadors.
This isn't just a process question. I think it matters. It's at the heart of what happened with Ollie Robbins as well, Sir Ollie Robbins, who's been sacked over this, right? Because it put him in a bit of a difficult position. The fact that Number 10 have announced that this guy is going to be the ambassador, I mean, it would have been politically very, very difficult for him to go in and overturn that decision to come to you. He probably felt that he was trying to fix it for you guys to do you a
when you say it
favour.
would be politically very difficult, one of the virtues of a politically neutral civil service is that they are not charged with responsibility for making those political judgments. I think most people watching this programme would think if there was material information that the UK vetting agencies had come up with concerns and made a recommendation in relation to what's a highly intrusive vetting process, that rightly and reasonably that would be flagged to the ministers concerned, not only at the time, when the appointment had been made, but also subsequently when the Prime Minister, both in the House of Commons and at a press conference in Hastings, was addressing these issues directly.
But I guess
we as ministers rely on the civil service being candid and open with us in terms of where there are any questions in relation to the full information around any statements that we're making, whether in Parliament or elsewhere.
I guess a lot of people would also feel, wouldn't they, that actually the Prime Minister deciding to appoint Peter Mandelson, as you admitted, a mistake, announcing it before all the vetting was undergone, also a problem. Can I ask you another question on China too? Because there's an awful lot around saying that Peter Mandelson failed the security vetting because of links to China. The Sunday Times leaked documents suggesting the biggest client of his lobbying firm was a company linked to the Chinese military. I mean, was that the reason he failed the vetting?
Honestly, I don't know. I haven't seen and been party to the vetting process. I wasn't in any way part of this appointment process. But the point stands that developed vetting is to look at all of these issues. And in that sense, it's important. The reason you undertake developed vetting is to equip people with the ability to exercise judgment and to make decisions. And even good people can make bad judgments.
I mean, what we need now is full transparency, right? You're saying that you don't actually know the reason he failed. When are we going to get the next tranche of appointments related to, of documents related to that appointment? That will come as quickly as possible. Do we know when that's going to be?
I can't give you a definitive answer. I would observe, firstly, there's a live police investigation underway, which means we need to be careful, appropriately careful, with what documents can be shared, although the intention, of course, is to adhere to the will of Parliament. And secondly, where there are questions over national security, the Intelligence and Security Committee has accepted a responsibility to be able to adjudicate and to offer a view. But the intention on the part of government, as was clear by some of the documents that have emerged in the last few days, is to proceed at pace with disclosing these documents.
The last time you came to the morning round and spoke to us here was when Keir Starmer blocked Andy Burnham's attempt to become a MP. So it was a kind of another, I guess, politically perilous moment. Is that what Number 10 does? You know, whenever Keir Starmer has a leadership issue, red code, call for Douglas Alexander?
I don't know, I'm always very happy to come and talk about Scotland. If you want to cover it on the programme as well, I'm always free and available.
What's your message to MPs who might be thinking about a change of leader?
I think that there are rightfully and reasonably important questions that need to be answered today. Keir Starmer is going to set out all the facts. The right place for those questions to be answered are at the dispatch box of the House of Commons. But we saw the Leader of the Opposition as recently as Friday claiming that the Prime Minister lied. That central contention that he willfully and intentionally misled Parliament and the public now relies, given what's emerged since then, on what would need to be a growing conspiracy, not just of every minister involved in this process, but a growing number of senior civil servants. These judgments matter. And in that sense, people need to reach a judgment in the round. The right place to do that is the House of Commons this afternoon, and the Prime Minister will set out his case. Kemi Badenoch will have to defend that she accused the Prime Minister of lying, but seems now to be backing off that central charge.
Andy Burnham went to Angela Rayner's on Friday night. What do you reckon they're talking about? Nice weather, barbecue maybe? What do you think?
I don't know. Listen, I know Andy, you mentioned that I'd served in the Cabinet with Peter Mandelson. I served in the Cabinet with Andy. Andy is a sociable guy. I have no idea what he was talking about. Probably his favourite football team, Everton, amongst other things, because Andy always talks about Everton.
Do you think that Keir Starmer's going to lead Labour into the next election?
I expect so, yes.
You expect so?
Yeah, I think he will.
Not certain, no.
Listen, there are no certainties, but of course I think he will, and I think he should, because frankly, on the biggest call of this Parliament, he's exercised the right judgment, which is to keep us out of someone else's war. Of course, there's always going to be scuttlebutt and commentary about who's up, who's down. But on the really big calls, which actually affect the people watching this programme, he's made the right call. And in that sense, yes, he will lead the party into the next election.
Finally, talk about those big calls. Let's talk about Iran for a moment, shall we? The US stormed an Iranian ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's now closed the strait. They've rejected the second round of peace talks. How concerned is the government this morning about the situation in the Middle East?
Of course we're concerned. Not only does it make the case that we've consistently argued from day one of this conflict for de-escalation, but it also makes the case that, if you like, we have a responsibility to be directly engaged in trying to influence what happens in the Gulf, because it materially affects the lives, the circumstances, the livelihoods of people back home here in the United Kingdom.